Hello and good day to everybody. I hope everybody's doing well and keeping your head up during these times, especially now. Today I'm one of your presenters. I'm Louis St. Victor, and today we will be learning about the 1976 court case, Craig V Boren. So this takes place in the year 1976. And what's really interesting about it is that the whole issue with this case is that it involves a beverage we're all pretty acquainted with, and that beverage being beer. So the whole reason this court case came to the Supreme Court's doorstep is due in part because there was an Oklahoma law that had prohibited the sale of non-intoxicating beer, um, 3.2% of alcohol to be exact, to males between the ages of 18 and 21. And also, I'd like to note, females were allowed to buy um, this beer between the ages of 18 and 21. Okay, so one interesting note, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with, was actually an attorney on the case, and she's a Supreme Court justice now, and she's very well regarded and iconic for her historic fights with gender discrimination, especially here in the United States of America. Now, this whole case involves this individual, this man, Craig, and he was not allowed to purchase beer because he was, I believe, 20 at the time, and he wasn't allowed to buy the specific 3.2% alcohol of beer. Now, what he had done was he had brought this law to the state's attention, so he took it locally. He took himself to the District Court of Oklahoma and decried that this was a statutory scheme preventing the sale of 3.2% beer to men between 18 and 21, and that it should be ruled as a gender-based discrimination, and that it also violates the Equal Protections Clause, which is in the 14th Amendment. So to extrapolate on the Equal Protections Clause, this is basically a protective clause that was within the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment was created shortly after the Civil War in 1868, so during the Reconstructive era of the United States, and it was basically for African Americans and slaves to be guaranteed citizenship. And also, it guarantees all citizens equal protection of laws and their rights. Now back to the court case. So Craig lost this battle. So with the district courts, because this is where he brought it to first. And so when the locals, or even better yet, the district court isn't getting the message, you rightfully bring this to the Supreme Court, and this is what Craig did. What's interesting about this case, is that the state of Oklahoma were very much well aware of the fact that the law did in fact violate the Equal Protections Clause, and because of its gender-based discrimination, specifically against males. Oklahoma also stated that this law was conceived in an effort to promote traffic safety. And they further back this, the Supreme Court further back this with statistics that displayed the percentage of males against females from ages ranging from 18 to 21 that were arrested while intoxicated under the influence of alcohol. What the statistics were showing was that 2% of males between this 18 and 21 age range were arrested while intoxicated, and for females it was significantly lower and very low at just 0.18%. I can totally see the intentions behind this whole law, because men are in fact more likely to get into vehicle accidents, to die. They do die more. I can completely see the intentions of this law being enacted, because men are in fact more likely to be reckless behind the wheel than females, and alcohol can have an influence on that. But then with this case, it's only 3.2% alcohol, and it's also non-intoxicating, so that's where it can get faulty. But anyways, the problem I think with this is that it had to be approached in a much more different manner. So this law had to be approached in a much more different manner that wasn't so draconian and discriminatory. But then it also has me thinking about how this was only in the year 1976, which is not too far long after the heels of the civil rights movement. So it's not surprising at all to me that like a rigid law like this was in place. So with further research, I was introduced to how courts have standards of review in tackling situations such as these, like equal protection clause cases. The route that the court took was termed intermediate scrutiny, which was a fairly new concept at the time, and this standard states that the law must be essentially related to promoting an important governmental objective. And the state of Oklahoma's important objective being to promote traffic safety. So at the end of all of this, the Supreme Court did eventually acknowledge that promoting traffic safety was, it is an important governmental objective, but that the data that was provided was lacking, and it was unequal to back Oklahoma's claim that gender classification laws put in place was for furthering that interest. And also the difference between the 2% of females and 0.18% of females wasn't significant enough in supporting a definite classification based on your gender, based on one's gender. And the law was reversed and deemed as unconstitutional. But with this case, it just keeps bringing me back to that mind-opening Sarah Hedley-Brooke No Mercy Here, and many discussions we've had during our lectures where we learned how like there's many of the systems in place today can trace their roots back to the times of slavery and persecution of African Americans. For example, like the census that has its roots in counting African Americans. The prison system, and just like with this case, the Equal Protections Clause, which derives from the 14th Amendment, which was created to guarantee citizenship to slaves and African Americans after the Civil War. So, yes. So this law, Craig V. Boren, it was passed in 1976, and this was basically gender discrimination, but this was towards men. But what I've been thinking about is how, like, even though this was a petty law put in place, because it was just 3.2% of intoxicating beer, it just has me wondering, like, I just think there's a disparity between petty laws, like between men and women. For example, in Florida, I know there's this law where it's like, if you're an unmarried woman, you can't even parachute on a Sunday.
So that's like way too specific and petty, and it just has me wondering, like, just how much laws they have like that in place, but specifically towards women. But my question for you is, um, but my question for you is, how significant do you think the Jim Crow era was for the justice system today in America? Good night.